A 19-year-old girl reaches her hand straight into the one dark corner of the hall that everyone else has quietly walked around. Behind the veil, something breathes out, slow, warm, and far too large for anything listed in the catalog. She doesn't look at the crowd. She counts the breaths. There's a scar across her collarbone. That scar belongs to a body that already died. Candles waver. The first elder's staff stops midair and does not come down. The red seal set into the stone floor, the one that hasn't opened in 300 years, begins to warm under the heel of her boot. Someone in the back row whispers 3 words. That's the second daughter. A voice comes out of the dark, low and old as bedrock. You're either the bravest thing that's ever walked into this hall, or the stupidest. She reaches through the veil. Every candle in the hall goes out at once. She has stood in this hall before. Twice. Not this exact hall. Not this exact hour. But close enough that the incense smells the same. Close enough that the candlelight still makes the spirit wolves look holy, when they are not holy, when they are just animals bred for pride, and paraded like crowns with legs. Reina Ashfane knows this hall the way a man knows the inside of his own coffin. Because she has been buried twice already. And she is not planning on a third box. She is 19. She has been 19 before. The first time, she believed a man named Corin Vale, when he said he loved her. Believed the way his eyes went soft, when they landed on hers. Believed it enough to turn her back on him one night in a war tent, that smelled like rain and iron. Which was a mistake. Because his blade went into her ribs, before she finished her sentence. Because his hand covered her mouth, so the scream never got out. Because she died at 24, still believing, right up until the moment belief stopped mattering. The second time, she didn't believe anyone. She built herself alone. Bonded a stormhawk instead of a man. Climbed the ranks, with her jaw clenched, and her back straight, and her heart locked somewhere she couldn't reach it even, if she wanted to. She almost made it. Almost sat the throne. Except a cousin, from a rival branch of the family, not Selwyn, a different life, a different house entirely, poisoned the bond, from the inside, and Reina's spirit cracked like river ice in a thaw nobody warned her about. She died at 31. Alone in a room she'd built, with her own 2 hands, believing that solitude was armor. It wasn't. So here she is. Third time. 19 years old. Standing in the hall of choosing, with her family's crest stitched into her collar, and her family's blood running cold in her veins, and she is done. Done believing men with soft eyes. Done believing that solitude keeps you safe. Done playing the game the way the game wants to be played. This time she's going to break it. The hall is packed. 67 spirit beasts pace behind a shimmering veil, catalogued, ranked, groomed for exactly this moment, the moment where 19-year-old heirs walk up and put their hands on destiny and call it love. Reina watches the crowd. Watches her half-sister Selwyn glide 3 places ahead of her in the line, golden hair, golden voice, golden everything, performing warmth the way other people perform breathing. Effortless. Automatic. A lie so smooth it doesn't even feel like lying anymore. Reina stares at the back of Selwyn's head. Feels nothing. Which is new. Because in her first life she felt everything. In her second life she felt nothing on purpose. But this is different. This is the particular stillness of a woman who has already lost everything twice, and has decided, calmly, without drama, that it is simply not going to happen again. The first elder raises his staff. Blood-marked of the Dominion, he calls out. Step forward. Choose. One by one, the heirs move. Selwyn goes first, because Selwyn always goes first, because Selwyn has spent her whole life making sure she goes first. She glides to the veil like she's walking down an aisle at her own wedding. The crowd murmurs. A great golden wolf steps out, from behind the shimmer, huge, proud, its coat catching every candle flame in the room like it was born to be looked at. Reina knows that wolf. Knew it in her first life. Corran's wolf. The one that carried his loyalty right up, until it carried a blade, into her ribs instead. Selwyn places her hand on its mane. The Bond flares gold, warm, cinematic, exactly the kind of light that makes old men in the gallery sigh like they've witnessed a miracle. Reina doesn't react. It's her turn. She walks past the golden wolf. Past the silver-ranked hawks. Past a jade-eyed hound 3 girls ahead of her had been begging the ancestors for since childhood. The crowd shifts. Someone whispers. An elder near the back makes a sound like a man biting down on a splinter. She stops at the far edge of the veil. Where nobody stands. Where the candlelight doesn't quite reach. Where the other heirs, without even seeming to notice they're doing it, have all stepped carefully, deliberately, around. Something breathes back there. No plaque. No rank. Just a faint barrier seal glowing low, and red at the edges, and Reina knows exactly what that seal means, because she's read enough law in 2 lifetimes to recognize it on sight. Not a containment ward. A warning ward. The kind you put on something the Dominion decided was too dangerous to ever offer. The thing behind the veil looks at her. Eyes like a dying star. Old light. Old fire. The kind of gaze that has watched things happen for longer than most kingdoms have existed. And then, impossibly, it speaks. You're either the bravest thing that's ever walked into this hall, the voice says, low, pressing into her chest like a hand flat against a locked door, or the stupidest. Haven't decided, Reina says. The hall goes silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has weight. That presses down on your shoulders like snow, before it falls. She holds that burning gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she reaches through the veil. The light that comes isn't gold. It's deep. Red-black, fractured through with veins of molten gold, like something burning slow underground for 3 centuries, waiting for someone stubborn enough to dig it out. It doesn't rise soft, and pretty the way Selwyn's did. It detonates. One single pulse of heat, and pressure that blows out every candle in the hall at once, and sends 3 elders stumbling backward, robes flapping, dignity gone. Darkness. Then, from somewhere in that darkness, a voice. That's the second daughter. Another voice, tighter, afraid. What has she done? The candles reignite. And there he stands. Enormous. The size of a draft horse. Black fur that doesn't reflect light, so much as swallow it whole. Amber eyes, ringed with something that looks like a scar burned in, from the inside. The bond chain between them doesn't manifest soft and silver like it's supposed to. It comes out, as a pulse, red, gold, irregular, running, from her sternum straight, into his chest, beating like 2 hearts, that haven't decided, yet whether they're going to fight each other, or die together. The first elder steps forward. His voice trying hard to sound calm, and not quite making it. This spirit has not been offered for selection, he says. It is under a sealing ward. The bond cannot be. It already is, Reina says. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. It drops into the room like a stone, into still water, and the ripples reach every wall. Bonds don't wait for permission. The elder's jaw works once. Twice. He is old enough to know she's right, and old enough to hate that she's right, and there is nothing in Dominion law that says what happens when a girl reaches through a warning ward, and the warning ward simply lets her. Because there is no precedent. Not for refusing a completed bond. Barely any precedent for what she just did in the first place. Selwyn turns. Just her head. Just enough. The golden wolf sits calm beside her, and her face performs curiosity, performs warmth, performs mild surprise like a woman flipping through a script she's memorized 100 times. But Reina watches the gold in her sister's aura curdle at the edges. A sick green creeping in like rot under good paint. Reina allows herself exactly 1 private second of satisfaction. Then she goes back to being still. They try to separate the bond anyway. Of course they do. It takes 3 elders. 2 rank 5 warriors. A barrier strong enough to hold a rogue cultivator. It takes 40 minutes, and 40 witnesses, before someone finally says out loud, in front of God, and everyone, that the bond will not break. It doesn't resist violently. It doesn't need to. Every time they push, it just holds. With the total, bored indifference of something that has simply decided obstacles don't apply to it anymore. On the 3rd failed attempt, the voice comes back, into her head. Not through the air this time. Through the bond itself. Like a knock on a door she didn't know she had. They're going to try to exile you, he says. Conversational. Almost bored. Reina doesn't look at Elder Meredith, standing grey-robed near the dais, already scratching something, onto a scroll, that is very obviously not an assessment form. I know, she says. Barely moving her lips. Most people at this stage would be panicking. Most people haven't died twice. A pause. Long enough that she can feel him turning the sentence over, testing its weight. 3rd life, he says. Not a question. She doesn't answer. Doesn't need to. Doesn't deny it either. No one else could see me, through that veil, he says. I made sure of it. Every heir who walked past, I made them walk past. You walked straight to me. In a room full of golden wolves, and silver hawks, and a jade hound 3 girls would have killed for. You walked straight to the thing behind the warning seal. I know what golden wolves lead to, she says. So you chose the cursed one. I chose the strongest one, she corrects. The curse is just what frightened people call what they can't control. The amber ring around his eyes flares, just slightly. Just enough that she notices. The elders reconvene. It takes them an hour behind closed doors, and when they come back out, the verdict isn't exile, because exile requires a unanimous vote, and Elder Meredith cannot get 12 hands raised, when 2 of the elders are old enough to remember what happened the last time a cursed bond formed, and what it eventually became. So they compromise. 6 months. Cinderfall Ridge. The outermost trial ground of the Ashfane clan, where the Dominion sends heirs it wants to quietly disappear. If she advances in rank, the bond stands. She's recognized. Formal. Binding. Untouchable. If she doesn't. Nobody finishes that sentence out loud. They don't have to. Reina hears it anyway, hanging in the space between the words they did say. They expect her to fail. They are counting on her to fail. The Ridge has swallowed 3 cultivators in the last decade, and none of them came back at rank. None of them came back at all. Selwyn comes to see her off the morning she leaves. She looks genuinely sad. It is, Reina has to admit, a masterful performance. The slight downward pull at the corner of her mouth. The warmth pulled carefully in her eyes. The way she reaches out, and takes both of Reina's hands like she's afraid to let go. Sister, Selwyn says, soft. And every word in her voice says I'm worried about you, while nothing behind her eyes says anything at all. I'll speak to Elder Meredith. Perhaps the assessment period could be shortened. Don't, Reina says. She doesn't pull her hands away. Doesn't need to. Her tone does the pulling for her. Save the performance for the council. Something flickers across Selwyn's face. Fast. So fast most people in the courtyard would have missed it entirely, a half second, where the warm sadness drops away, and something flat and cold takes its place, before the mask slides back on smooth, as ice refreezing, over a crack. You've always misread me, Selwyn says. I've always read you exactly right, Reina says. And we both know it. She turns. Walks toward the ridge road. doesn't look back. Behind her, the hall of choosing empties out slow, the way a courtroom empties, after a verdict nobody expected. Elder Meredith doesn't leave with the others. She stands at the edge of the dais a long moment, watching the space, where the veil used to hang, now just scorched fabric, and the smell of blown-out candles. An aide approaches her. Young. Nervous. Holding a scroll like it might bite him. Elder. The Ashfane girl. Do we log this as? We log it as nothing yet, Meredith says. Doesn't look at him. We log it as a problem. Problems get solved before they get named. The aide hesitates. And the beast, Elder? The records say it was never meant to be offered at all. Someone had to have opened the ward. Someone did, Meredith says. Quiet. Final. Find out who. She turns and walks away, robes cutting the air behind her like a closing door. Behind her, in the gallery that's emptying slow, Selwyn lingers a moment longer than she needs to. Watches the scorch marks on the stone, where the veil used to hang. Her face, alone now, unwatched, does something it never does in a crowd, goes flat. Calculating. The warmth switched off like a lamp, with nobody left in the room to see it burning. Then a passing elder glances her way, and the warmth switches back on, smooth as breathing, and Selwyn is golden again by the time anyone thinks to look. Reina doesn't hear any of that. She's already 3 streets gone, already past the gates, already walking toward a road that most people in this city will spend the next 6 months pretending doesn't exist. Bran Kestrel is waiting at the base of the road. He's not what she expected, not that she expected anything, not really, but if she had, it wouldn't have been this. A man in his early 30s, hair gone gray at the temples too early for the years he's actually lived, a pack slung over one shoulder, and a weapon harness strapped tight across his chest, and absolutely no expression on his face whatsoever. Not cold. Not warm. Just settled. Like a man who has already decided what today is going to cost him, and made his peace with the bill before it arrived. She stops. Studies him. In this life, she's never spoken to him. Not once. In her second life he didn't appear, until 3 months into her exile, and by then she was too far gone in grief to ask the right questions about why a stranger would follow a stranger into the wilderness. She never asked. Not until it was too late to matter. She knows now. A life debt. Old. Complicated. Owed to someone in her bloodline, before she was even born. A debt he's been carrying since he was 17 years old. You don't have to come, she says. I know, he says. A long pause. The ridge is brutal, she says. I know that too, he says. That's it. That's the whole exchange. No speeches. No declarations. Just 2 flat sentences, and a silence that says more than either of them is willing to. From somewhere near her left shoulder, a low heat gathers, ash grim, half-manifest, invisible to anyone, without the Bond to see him. Oh, wonderful, the voice says in her head, dry as old parchment. The stray followed you home. Reina doesn't react. But Bran's eyes flick, just slightly, toward the empty space, where the voice came from. The exact attentiveness of a man noticing something he can't see, and filing it away for later, without asking a single question about it, which tells Reina more about how observant he actually is than a month of conversation would have. She turns back to the road. Keep up, she says. To both of them. The ridge is everything she remembered. And worse. Beautiful, in the specific way that beautiful things, with no interest whatsoever in your survival, tend to be. Dark stone plateaus stretching out under a sky the color of a fresh bruise. Forests of white bark trees, so dense they choke out most of the daylight. A permanent low mist that makes distance a lie you can't trust. The shelter is 2 rooms and a collapsed wall. The water runs clean for 6 hours a day, before the mineral content shifts, and turns it, into something you'd have to be desperate to drink. The spiritual pressure hits her the second she crosses the tree line. Not sudden. Constant. The kind of weight that doesn't announce itself, doesn't roar, doesn't do anything dramatic at all, it just sits on your chest, day after day, until one morning you wake up and realize your cultivation hasn't moved an inch in a week, and the land itself has been quietly, patiently, working against you the entire time. That first night, she sits at the edge of the plateau. Watches the dark fall away beneath her like the world just stops. She begins the meditation sequence she spent 3 years learning in her second life. Ashgrim manifests beside her. Partial human form, for the first time, a startling structure of a face, a nose that's been broken, and reset wrong at least once, that same amber-ringed gaze burning steady in the dark. He drops into a crouch next to her, with the kind of easy, inevitable grace that belongs to something that stopped counting years a long time ago. Your foundation is wrong, he says. No softening. No introduction. Just drops it, into the silence like a stone, into a well. Not dangerously wrong, he adds. Structurally wrong. You've been building on a technique that plateaus at rank 4. I know, she says. Then why? Because it's the technique my clan teaches. And I was 19. And I didn't know, yet what I know now. She opens her eyes. Looks at him directly. Show me the correct foundation. I'm not asking politely, she adds, before he can say anything. I'm asking correctly. You're my bonded spirit. Our advancement is linked. You want to stay at this rank? The amber ring flares. No one has ever spoken to me that way. Good, she says. Then you'll remember this conversation. He's quiet for a long moment. Long enough that the mist shifts, curls, resettles around them like it's waiting too. Then something in his face recalibrates. Not softened. Not warm. Just sharpened, the way a weapon gets sharpened when it finally lands in the hands of someone who actually knows what to do with it. Start with stillness, he says, and his voice has dropped its sarcasm completely, maybe for the first time since she reached through that veil. Not the stillness of waiting. The stillness of knowing. She thinks about the first time she held a stance like this. Her first life. A different mountain, a different teacher, a soft-voiced instructor, who told her cultivation was about grace. About surrender. About letting the energy move through you like water finds its level. It was a lie. Or not a lie exactly. Just a truth that only worked for people who had time to be graceful. Reina doesn't have time. She's used up 2 lifetimes worth of patience already, spent on men who didn't deserve it, and thrones that weren't worth the climbing. What's left isn't grace. What's left is will. She holds the stance until her arms go numb, then past numb, into a place where the pain stops being pain and starts being information, a signal, a map, a set of coordinates telling her exactly where the wrongness in her foundation used to live and doesn't anymore. Below them, the world of the Dominion keeps turning without her. Behind them, in the shelter, Bran Kestrel is repairing the collapsed wall by moonlight. Doesn't ask for help. Doesn't announce what he's doing. Just does it, the way a man works, when he's already decided, somewhere quiet and wordless, that he isn't leaving. And in Reina's chest, the bond pulse keeps beating its irregular rhythm. Wrong by every metric the Dominion has ever recorded. Powerful beyond every standard they've ever set. She lets it. Because she has spent 2 lives choosing the things that looked safe. And she knows exactly where that road ends. Back in the Dominion, in a council chamber sealed against spiritual perception, Elder Meredith sets down a document. Looks across the table at 2 faces that don't speak, because they don't need to. Selwyn sits between them. Golden. Composed. Hands folded in her lap like a woman at prayer. The assessment period is 6 months, Meredith says. She won't need 6 months to fail, Selwyn says. Her voice is warm. Gentle. The kind of gentle that could put a knife through you and apologize for the mess. She just needs to be alone long enough. The document on the table isn't an assessment form. It's a termination order. On the third night, she dreams. Not of the ridge. Of the war tent. Of rain on canvas, and a man's hand closing over her mouth before she can scream. She wakes with her own hand pressed flat against her lips, breath ragged, heart going like something trying to escape her chest. Ashgrim is there instantly. Not touching her. Just present, a wall of warmth in the dark. You were dreaming. I was remembering, she says. He doesn't ask her to explain. Doesn't need to. The bond runs both directions, she's starting to understand that now, and some nights it carries more than either of them means to send. His name was Corin, she says anyway. Because saying it out loud feels like setting down a stone she's been carrying, since before she can remember carrying it. In my first life. I loved him. He killed me for it. Why? I never found out. I died wondering. Ashgrim is quiet for a long moment. That's the part they don't warn you about, he says finally. Not the dying. The wondering. You sound like you know something about that. I've had 300 years to wonder why someone I trusted decided I was worth more in chains. Neither of them says anything else. The fire burns low. Somewhere in the dark, an owl calls once and stops. And Reina lies back down, and this time, when she closes her eyes, the dream doesn't come back. The first month on the ridge does not break Reina. It tries. The pressure works like a vice, not sudden, not dramatic, just constant and incremental, tightening one turn a day, until one morning you realize your cultivation base hasn't advanced at all, and the land itself has been pushing back against every meditation, every careful hour spent rebuilding from nothing. Most cultivators who come here feel it first as exhaustion. Then discouragement. Then, eventually, a small reasonable voice inside their own head that says this isn't working, this was never going to work, go home. Reina knows that voice. It sounds exactly like the version of her that died the first time. She doesn't go home. By the end of week 2, she and Ashgrim have taken her entire cultivation base apart down to the bone, and started rebuilding it, from the correct foundation. It is agonizing, the way necessary things almost always are. She loses a full rank in the process. Drops to baseline. For 11 straight days she is, functionally, the weakest cultivator on the entire ridge, and the pressure, that felt like a vice at rank 2 becomes, at baseline, something closer to gravity doubled. She moves through each day like she's walking, through deep water. Ashgrim does not go easy on her. That's not a surprise. What surprises her is how precise his brutality is. He doesn't push her past her limit in ways that cause damage. He pushes her exactly to the edge of it and holds her there, finding that line, with an accuracy that suggests he's been studying it since the very moment they bonded. Again, he says, on the 15th day, standing in the whitebark forest, while she holds a cultivation stance meant to balance her output against the ridge's resistance. Her arms are shaking. Every meridian in her body feels scraped raw, and refilled with something that burns going down. I've held this for 4 minutes, she grits out. 4 minutes and 30 seconds is where the technique sets, he says. You're at 3:45. Keep holding. How do you know the exact threshold? Because I've been alive for 300 years, he says, flat, factual, the certainty of a man who's stopped needing to raise his voice for anyone to believe him. And I've trained 47 cultivators. Her arms shake harder. Were any of them good? A pause. 4 of them. What happened to the other 43? They stopped holding at 3:45. She holds it. 4 minutes and 31 seconds. When she finally releases the stance, something clicks, deep, structural, a beam sliding, into place inside her chest for the first time exactly, where it's supposed to be. The pressure on the ridge, which has been a constant crushing weight since the moment she arrived, drops by a third. Not because the ridge changed. Because she's finally built correctly enough to stand in it. She straightens up slowly. Every muscle in her body files a formal complaint. Ashgram looks at her. Says nothing. But the bond pulse between them shifts, the irregular rhythm calming by a fraction, two hearts moving a little closer to sync. What was that? She asks. Pressing a hand flat to her sternum. The bond responding to advancement, he says. It does that. Will it always feel like that? Like what? She considers the word. Like something being recognized. He's quiet longer than usual this time. Only if the advancement is real, he says finally. The bond doesn't respond to performance. Only to truth. Bran, sitting against a tree 20 feet off, pretending very hard to sharpen a blade he sharpened an hour ago, tilts his head just slightly. He says nothing. But Reina is beginning to notice that saying nothing is a thing Bran Kestrel has clearly practiced for a long time. No one gets that calibrated by accident. You heard all that, she says, not turning to look at him. Wasn't trying to, he says. Which is not the same as yes. But contains it entirely. What do you know about Ashgrim's curse? Bran is quiet for a moment, the specific quality of quiet that means a man is deciding how much to say, not because he's hiding something, but because he's careful with the weight of words. That it isn't his, he says finally. Not originally. Someone put it on him. The white bark trees creak in the wind. Ashgrim, half manifest near her shoulder, goes very still. The amber ring around his eyes burns brighter than usual. Is that true? She asks him. It isn't relevant to your training, Ashgrim says. I didn't ask if it was relevant to my training. A long pause. The bond pulse ticks its irregular beat between them, waiting. Then, with the specific flatness of a man disclosing something he hasn't disclosed in a very long time. 312 years ago, a clan elder bound a suppression curse into my spiritual core. To prevent me from fully manifesting. A beat. They wanted my power, without my will attached to it. It didn't work the way they planned. The curse calcified around the suppression instead of breaking it, and I've been carrying both ever since. Reina is very quiet. What happens if the curse is removed? No one has ever gotten close enough to find out. I will, she says. Simply. Factually. No ceremony attached to it, not a promise performed for anyone's benefit, just a statement of intent, delivered in the exact same tone she'd used to announce a training schedule. It lands in the space between them like something set down carefully. On purpose. Ashgrim stares at her. You keep doing that, he says. Doing what? Saying things as though they're already true. They are already true, she says. I just haven't done them yet. The amber ring flares. He looks away first. Which is the first time she's noted that happening. By the end of the second month, she's rebuilt to rank 3, correct foundation this time, which means her rank 3 now carries the structural load of a rank 5 built wrong. The difference is invisible to casual assessment. Which is exactly what she needs it to be. She has no interest in the Dominion knowing what she's building, until it's finished. There's a trader, who comes through the lower switchbacks once a month, hauling salt and dried meat, and news nobody asked for. Old man. Missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He doesn't know who Reina is, or doesn't care, which is exactly why Bran trusts him enough to trade for supplies. On one of his visits, the old man mentions, offhand, like it's gossip, and nothing more, that there's been unusual traffic on the Dominion Road. Riders moving at night. Not merchants. Not messengers with the usual seals. Military cut, some of them, he says, chewing on a strip of dried meat like the words don't cost him anything. Moving quiet. Moving toward the ridge switchback, then doubling back like they lost their nerve. Strange business. Bran relays it to Reina that evening, watching her face for a reaction she doesn't give him. Someone's scouting the approach, she says. Could be nothing. Could be, she agrees. Could also be someone deciding 6 months is too long to wait, and seeing what the terrain looks like, before they commit to a shorter timeline. Ashgrim, listening from the shadows, doesn't offer an opinion. But the Bond pulse ticks a little faster, that night, and neither of them mentions it, and none of them sleep particularly well. The message arrives at the end of month 2, in the claw of a hawk bearing an official seal. It informs Reina Ashfane that her assessment period has been revised, due to concerns about bond stability, a phrase that technically means nothing, and practically means whatever Elder Meredith needs it to mean today. A mid-assessment evaluation will now be conducted at the end of month 3 instead of month 6. If she cannot demonstrate rank 4, or above, her bond will be referred to the full Elder Council for dissolution. She reads it twice. Folds it precisely. Sets it down. They moved the timeline, Bran says. He's read it over her shoulder. She let him. Yes. A month from now. Yes. Can you reach rank 4 by then? She considers it honestly. From rank 3, correct foundation, under ridge conditions, with a bond that hasn't fully stabilized, it isn't impossible. It's simply the kind of thing that requires everything she has, and costs considerably more than that on top. Yes, she says. From the corner of the clearing, Ashgrim's voice arrives, dry as ever. With significantly more suffering than you're currently imagining. I assumed, Reina says. Good, he says. Then we start tonight. What follows is the worst month of all 3 of her lives. Ashgrim tears her training down, and rebuilds it entirely. Longer sessions. Shorter rest. A technique that requires her to channel the ridge's resistance instead of fighting it, using the pressure itself as fuel. It works the way drinking something that burns works. Terrible going down, and then a heat in the chest that's almost impossible to tell apart from strength. She sleeps 4 hours a night. Eats mechanically, whatever Bran puts in front of her, barely tasting any of it. Bran, for his part, keeps the camp running, with a quiet competence, that becomes, somewhere in the exhaustion of the 3rd month, something Reina notices, without having the energy left to examine it properly. He anticipates things. Not intrusively. She never has to ask for water, after a session, it's already there. The wall he repaired the first week has now held, through 2 ridge storms, that should have taken the whole shelter apart. When she pushes past the point, where she should stop, and her legs give out mid-session, he's there before she's finished falling. A steadying hand under her arm. No comment. No fuss. Gone again the second she's stable on her feet. You're not a soldier assigned to this detail, she says one night, when the fire's burned low, and her bones feel like they've been replaced, with something that just aches, all the way through. You're a rank 2 cultivator, from a neutral clan, with no political stake in whether I live or die. Why are you actually here? He looks at the fire for a while before he answers. Your grandmother saved my life, when I was 17, he says. I was hurt in a border skirmish. Not even a real battle. Just a territorial dispute, that shouldn't have touched me at all. She found me on the road. Brought me back. Didn't ask for anything in return. A pause. She died before I could repay it. Reina looks at him. She knows her grandmother, not well, the woman died when Reina was 5, but she knows the shape of her. The things people said afterward. She wouldn't have wanted repayment, Reina says. I know, Bran says. That's why I'm still here. The fire crackles. Wind moves through the white bark trees. And from just outside the firelight, Ashgrim's voice arrives low in her head, almost private. You should know, he says, the stray's loyalty is genuine. It's irritating. I wanted to tell you, before you did something stupid. Like not trust him. Reina blinks. Did you just say something complimentary about Bran? I said it was irritating. That's about as close as you get to a compliment, isn't it? Go to sleep, he says. You have 4 hours. She sleeps. Dreams of nothing. In the morning, she gets up. Begins again. On the final day, before the mid-assessment, something breaks. Not Reina. Not the training. The ridge. It starts at midday, a shift in the ambient pressure, that has nothing to do with cultivation and everything to do with intent. Reina is mid-session when she feels it. A vibration under her feet, encoded, deliberate, a high-tier spiritual attack running through the land itself rather than delivered directly. She's out of her stance, and moving before she's finished registering what it is. Ashgrim. I feel it. His voice comes back stripped of every trace of sarcasm. Suppression wave. Targeted to the bond. Someone's trying to fracture our connection from outside. From where? Dominion side. High tier. Multiple sources. This isn't one person. Bran is already on his feet across the clearing, his aura fully unsheathed for the first time since she's known him, and Reina has exactly 1 sharp second to register how much he's been holding back, because what's radiating off him right now is nowhere near rank 2. 3 months. 3 months of carrying water, repairing walls, sharpening a blade that apparently never needed sharpening in the first place. 3 months of a man making himself small enough to be invisible. She files the thought away. There isn't time for it now. There might not be time for it ever, depending on how the next hour goes. His eyes meet hers. We have incoming, he says. 2 cultivators, East Ridge. A third, holding distance. Directing the wave. Reina goes very still. 3. A suppression wave, running through the land, aimed at her bond. The day before the evaluation. This isn't an assessment. It's an elimination. If the wave hits the bond in its current state, Ashgrim says, careful now, deliberate, it fractures. Not destroys. Fractures enough that your rank drops, and tomorrow becomes irrelevant. Then we complete the bond stabilization tonight. That process takes. I know how long it takes, she says. Do we have another option? A pause. No. She turns to Bran. Hold the east approach. Don't engage the third, the one directing the wave. That's the priority target, and engaging directly accelerates it. Understood, Bran says. He's already moving. She drops into cultivation position. Ashgrim. Walk me through it. All of it. It's going to hurt. Everything hurts, she says. Walk me through it. He manifests fully beside her, full wolf form now, enormous, present, that dark coat swallowing the last of the afternoon light, while the bond pulse burns red gold between them, faster now, urgent. The wave targets the irregular rhythm, he says. To stabilize it we have to synchronize the pulse completely. That means you stop controlling the bond. Let it run at full capacity. What does it run at full capacity? A long pause. The weight of a 300-year answer behind it. Something no one in the Dominion has seen since the founding of your bloodline, he says. Your family didn't bond with mine by accident, Reina. It was always supposed to be this. They cursed me to make sure it never happened. The air on the ridge goes cold and clear. From the east, she hears the clean sound of Bran engaging, controlled, precise, a man who has spent 3 months pretending to be smaller than he is finally letting the pretending drop. She looks at the bond pulse burning between her chest and Ashgrim's. Thinks of 2 lives spent choosing the safe thing. Thinks of every cage that ever looked like a gift. Let it run, she says. And the ridge lights up like a second sun. The bond stops being 2 heartbeats arguing over direction. It becomes one. A single unbroken pulse, deep and resonant, the sound, if sound is even the word for it, of 300 years of caged power finally remembering what it was built to do. Reina's cultivation base, rebuilt from the ground up on a foundation that owes nothing to comfort, takes the full weight of it and does not shatter. It expands. Somewhere below the plateau, the suppression wave meets that expansion and simply fails. Slides off her like water off struck steel, and keeps sliding, back down the mountainside, back toward whoever was foolish enough to send it climbing in the first place. She doesn't see what happens to the third cultivator, the one who was directing the wave, from a safe distance, arrogant enough to believe distance was the same thing as safety. She only feels it, a violent recoil traveling back up the line of the attack, the unmistakable sensation of someone very far away hitting the ground hard, and staying there. The pressure that has crushed her for 2 months goes, all at once, completely silent. Like it had been testing her the entire time. Like it was waiting to see if she'd survive being taken apart, before it decided whether to let her stand back up. Reina opens her eyes. The Bond pulse beats in perfect synchrony now. Single. Steady. Enormous in its quiet, the way a held breath is enormous right before you finally let it go. Ashgrim is looking at her, still in wolf form, amber eyes burning steady in the dark, and there, faint, hairline thin, barely visible unless you already know to look for it, a fracture has opened in the ring around his eye. Small. New. The first crack in 300 years. Your eye, she says. I know, he says. Quiet. No one has ever made the Bond run at full capacity before. Not in 3 centuries. The curse is breaking. It will take more than one night, he says. But yes. She looks down at her own hands. The silver in her aura has changed, gold fracture lines running through it now, faint but unmistakable, the echo of a bond that finally stopped being managed and started being lived. Across the clearing, Bran comes back into the firelight. Knuckles split. Aura slowly retracting back down to whatever quiet size he's decided to wear in front of other people. He takes one look at Reina, and goes very still. What happened to your aura, he asks. It upgraded, she says. His eyes move to the fracture in Ashgrim's eye. Back to her. Something in his expression does something careful, and complicated, and settles. The evaluation is tomorrow, he says. I know. They're going to see this. I know that too. He's quiet a moment. And then, the first crack she's seen in his composure, since the day they met at the base of the ridge road, small, genuine, gone almost as soon as it appears. Are you afraid? Reina thinks about it honestly. The way 3 lifetimes have taught her to think about things, carefully, without flinching, the way you'd examine a wound, before deciding how bad it really is. No, she says. The thing I was afraid of was not being ready. She looks out at the dark plateau, the white bark trees, the place they sent her to disappear. I'm ready now. The fire burns low. The Bond pulse beats, steady, unbroken, 300 years of a curse carrying a fresh fracture, into the dark. And somewhere back in the Dominion, behind sealed doors, and careful smiles, people who spent 6 months certain of exactly how this story was going to end are about to discover they were wrong. Tomorrow, Reina Ashfane walks into a room built to watch her fail. She has no intention of giving them what they came for. Because she has already died twice believing the wrong things could be fixed by waiting long enough, or wanting hard enough, or loving someone, into being better than they were. This time there is no waiting. No wanting. Only the work, the foundation rebuilt stone by stone, the rank earned instead of granted, the bond that answers to truth, and nothing softer than truth. Whatever they bring into that chamber tomorrow, she will already have paid for the strength to meet it. That is the only kind of promise she trusts anymore. The kind you build, with your own hands, in the dark, when nobody's watching, and no one is coming to save you. She banks the fire. Checks the wards Bran set at the tree line, out of old habit more than doubt. And when she finally lies down to sleep, the Bond pulse beats steady against her sternum, once, twice, again, like something patient finally being given the room to breathe. 6 months, they told her. Disappear quietly, they meant. She closes her eyes on the last night, before the world finds out exactly how wrong they were. Morning comes gray. Comes cold. Comes the way mornings come after a night that almost took everything, and decided, at the last second, not to. Reina doesn't feel rested. She feels rebuilt. Which isn't the same thing. Rested is soft. Rebuilt has edges. She dresses in what she wore on the ridge. Dark slate gray. No clan ornamentation, no gold thread, no crest stitched anywhere visible. The bone and iron clasp holds her hair back the way it's held her hair back for 3 months of dust, and blood, and moonlight. The scar across her collarbone, the one, from her first life, the one that shouldn't exist, because that body died, sits exposed, and unhidden, and she makes no attempt to cover it. Because she isn't here to look like an heir. She's here to look like exactly what she is. Bran waits by the shelter door. Doesn't say good morning. Doesn't need to. He just falls into step half a pace behind her right shoulder, the way he's done every single day for 3 months, and something about the rhythm of it steadies her more than any speech could have. Ashgrim manifests at her left. Full human form. First time he's chosen to walk beside her like this instead of riding the Bond, as heat and presence. You could stay wolf, she says. Less to explain. I could, he agrees. But they should see the face of what they tried to erase. Not just the fur. She doesn't answer. Doesn't need to. They start down the mountain together, 3 shapes moving, through gray light toward a city that spent 6 months certain it had already won. The Dominion capital hasn't changed. Same towers. Same banners. Same crowds that part for nobody, and then part instantly, silently, the second they recognize who's walking through them. Word travels fast in a place built on gossip and blood loyalty. By the time Reina reaches the outer gate, half the city already knows a girl walked onto Cinderfall Ridge 3 months ago carrying rank 2, and something is walking back down carrying considerably more. Reina doesn't slow down for any of it. Doesn't need the whispers to tell her what today is. She already knows exactly what today is. The evaluation chamber isn't built for what's about to enter it. High ceilings. Stone walls inlaid, with clan crests going back centuries. A raised dais for the examining elders. Tiered gallery seating, standing room only today, because the Dominion requires attendance by law for bond evaluations, and law has never once stopped people from wanting to watch. It smells like ceremony. Like authority. Like the specific, practiced confidence of a room that has never once been surprised. Reina Ashfane walks through the main doors. Ashgrim at her left shoulder. Bran a step behind her right. The chamber goes quiet. Not polite quiet. Not respectful quiet. The particular silence of architecture meeting something it was never designed to contain. Her aura moves ahead of her, without effort, silver, threaded through with fracture lines of gold, running at a low, unhurried intensity that the assessment markers on the walls register, before she's even reached the center of the floor. An audible chime. Then another. Then a third, longer, harder, the sound of instruments calibrated for rank 4 straining against a signal well above their ceiling. The 3 examining elders on the dais exchange a look. Except Elder Meredith doesn't look at the others. She looks at Reina. Her gray aura, usually flat, usually immovable, contracts, just slightly. Not fear. Reina knows fear, has died from underestimating what it does to people, and this isn't fear. This is recalculation. In the gallery, Selwyn sits front row, ivory and gold, hands folded, face arranged into something that reads exactly like composed concern. The golden wolf isn't, with her, spirit beasts don't attend evaluation chambers, and without it, some of her performance goes a little thin at the edges. Reina clocks it. Selwyn came anyway. Which means she decided her presence mattered more than the optics of standing there, without her wolf. Which means she's planning something. Reina files that thought away and keeps walking. The lead elder, a man named Dolan, old enough to have earned genuine neutrality instead of just claiming it, rises from his seat, and begins the formal opening. The assessment will proceed in 3 stages, he says, voice measured, professional. Rank verification. Bond stability assessment. Cultivation advancement demonstration. Reina steps onto the assessment mark. Lets the chamber's instruments read her. Rank verification takes 11 seconds. Standard. Then the chimes keep going. Run past their calibration ceiling, and simply, don't stop. A murmur moves through the gallery like wind finding a crack in a wall. Elder Dolan looks at the instruments. Looks at Reina. Looks back at the instruments. The markers are reading above rank 5, he says. Keeping his voice level, but the effort shows. That's not possible for a cultivator assessed at rank 2 3 months ago. And yet, Reina says. Elder Meredith's voice comes smooth. Unhurried. The instruments may be compromised. Accursed Bond is known to produce false readings. The energy signature is irregular. The energy signature, Ashgrim says, is precisely regular. First time he's spoken aloud in this chamber. The sound of it carries harmonic weight, deep, deliberate, the voice of something that has existed across centuries, and has chosen, now, to be heard, not because anyone invited him to. The gallery goes very still. He steps forward, from Reina's left, and every cultivator in that room registers his aura at the same instant, a wave of involuntary flinch moving bench to bench, not from fear exactly, but from the pure animal recognition of something old, large, and not fully understood standing in your field of vision. My bond with Reina Ashfane is stable, Ashgrim says. The rank reading is accurate. The advancement is real. I'll submit to independent verification, from any elder in this room, who is not currently receiving instruction, from Elder Meredith. The silence that follows has a specific texture to it. Elder Dolan turns to look at Meredith, with the exact expression of a man watching ripples reach the far edge of a pond he just threw a stone into. Meredith's aura doesn't move. Her face doesn't change. But in the front row, Selwyn uncrosses her hands. Small. Barely visible. But Reina has spent 3 lifetimes studying her sister's tells, and she knows exactly what that gesture means. Selwyn has decided to stop waiting. She doesn't know yet what the move will be. She watches. Elder Dolan calls for independent verification. 2 elders step down from the gallery, clan neutral, as specified. The process takes 20 minutes, the chamber silent except for the low hum of cultivation instruments, and the steady, unbothered pulse of Reina's aura pressing against markers that were never built to hold it. The result comes back without ambiguity. Rank 5. Stable bond. Advancement genuine. The murmur that moves through the gallery this time has opinion woven into it. Fracture lines of clan politics shifting in real time, 40 witnesses quietly recalculating positions they've held for months, without ever once expecting to have to. The assessment is complete, Elder Dolan says. The bond stands. Reina Ashfane is formally recognized as. I'd like to raise a concern. Selwyn is already on her feet. Not interrupting, technically, she's timed it to the quarter-second gap between Tholan's words, and she is very, very good at that particular kind of timing. With respect to the Elder Council, she says, voice warm, carrying clean to the back row, her eyes fixed directly on Reina, there's a matter of lineage precedence that should be addressed before formal recognition is granted. Elder Dolan turns. Speak. Selwyn steps down from the gallery. Unhurried. Reina watches the room respond to her the way rooms have always responded to her, the automatic pull of attention, the warmth she pushes into the air around her, cultivators leaning forward, without quite realizing they're doing it. Reina thinks, 3 months ago, this would have worked on me. This is the trap she walked into in her second life. Public maneuvering, delivered in a room full of witnesses, timed for maximum damage. She isn't in her second life anymore. Clan protocol requires the primary blood-marked heir be verified before a secondary heir's bond receives formal recognition, Selwyn says. As primary heir, my bond was verified at the pairing ceremony. My rank stands at 6. The precedence is clear. A pause, perfectly measured. I say this, with no opposition to my sister's advancement, which is genuinely impressive. I say it only because the law exists for a reason, and we owe the Dominion our adherence to it. The gallery stirs. She's framed it as concern for protocol. Made any objection sound like lawbreaking. Turned proof of Reina's strength into the exact mechanism of her suppression. It's elegant. It's vicious. It is, Reina thinks, exactly the kind of move that's worked twice before. She lets the pause run 2 full seconds. She's right, Reina says. The room turns. Selwyn turns too, and for one fraction of a second something genuine crosses her face, surprise, real surprise, before the composure slides back into place. But Reina has already clocked it. The precedence law exists, Reina says. The primary heir has to be verified before the secondary's recognition can be formalized. My sister is correct. A pause. Which is why I'd like to invoke Article 14. Elder Meredith's aura contracts again. Sharper this time. Elder Dolan straightens. The challenge clause. Any secondary blood-marked heir who demonstrates cultivation rank equal to, or exceeding the primary heir's rank at time of formal recognition may petition for a comparison evaluation, Reina says. I'm currently assessed at rank 5. My sister is assessed at rank 6. I'm not petitioning for primary status. A beat. I'm invoking the comparison the law requires be offered when ranks fall within 1 tier of each other. A pause. It's the law, she adds. My sister said we owe the Dominion our adherence to it. The chamber goes very quiet. Article 14 hasn't been invoked in 60 years. Old law, written into the blood-marked code back when clan succession was still contested violently, and often designed to stop primary heirs from using procedural precedents to permanently lock a rising secondary heir out of the running. It's entirely legitimate. It requires, by its own terms, that the comparison be offered. Elder Dolan cannot decline it. Elder Meredith looks at Reina, from the dais, with the expression of a woman who has just watched her own mechanism used against her, spinning the exact opposite direction she built it to spin. Selwyn stands very still. Her gold aura carries a green edge at the perimeter. Reina notices, files it, says nothing. Selwyn composes her face into something gracious. Of course, she says, warm as ever. If the law requires it, I welcome the comparison. She's calculating. Rank 6 against rank 5. The numbers favor her. On paper. She hasn't accounted for the bond. That evening, in a private chamber sealed against spiritual perception, Selwyn stands across a narrow table from Elder Meredith, and for once, just once, the golden performance drops entirely. You told me the Ridge would finish her, Selwyn says. Voice tight. Not warm. Not gentle. Nothing like the voice the gallery heard an hour ago. The Ridge does what it's always done, Meredith says. It finishes the weak. She wasn't weak enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Meredith's aura, usually so carefully flat, flickers with something that might be fatigue, or might be fear wearing fatigue's clothes to avoid being recognized. The wave should have fractured the bond beyond recovery. Whoever ran it failed. That's not a small failure, Selwyn. That's the kind that gets noticed. By who? Meredith doesn't answer that. Which is, Selwyn realizes, its own kind of answer. You're afraid of something bigger than my sister, Selwyn says slowly. You have been this entire time. Everyone with enough sense should be, Meredith says. Tomorrow's comparison isn't the fight you think it is. Win it or lose it, it changes nothing about what's coming after. It only decides how much time we have left, before it arrives. Selwyn stares at her. For the first time in longer than she can remember, the practiced warmth in her own chest goes cold, and stays that way, no mask required to hide it, because there's no one left in the room she needs to perform for. Then why are we still doing this, she says. The precedence challenge. The wave. All of it. If it changes nothing? Because delay is still worth something, Meredith says. Even borrowed time is time. Win tomorrow, and you buy the council another season to prepare for what's actually coming. Lose it, and your sister inherits a war none of us have told her exists yet. Selwyn is quiet a long moment. You never cared whether I sat the throne, she says. Not a question. A realization, arriving late and unwelcome. This was never about me at all. Meredith's silence is its own confirmation. Selwyn turns and leaves, without another word, and for the first time in 3 lifetimes of Reina's story, her sister walks out of a room looking less like a golden heir, and more like a woman, who just discovered she'd been a tool the entire time, polished and pointed at a target she was never told the name of. She doesn't go back to the gallery that night. Doesn't attend the small private dinners the other clan heirs hold, after a chamber session, the ones where alliances get quietly traded, over good wine, and better manners. She goes back to her own quarters instead, alone, and sits by an unlit hearth for a long time, without calling for a servant to light it. Because for the first time, since she was a child memorizing the exact shape of her own smile in a polished blade, Selwyn Ashfane is starting to wonder, whose war she's actually been fighting all along. And whatever the answer turns out to be, it isn't one that lets her keep believing she was ever the one holding the reins. The comparison is set for the following morning, courtyard, full witness. Except the walk out of the chamber doesn't feel like victory. It feels like the first move in a much longer game, one Reina only just found out she'd already been playing for years, without knowing the board existed. The chamber empties around them in slow, uneven waves, clan representatives leaving in clusters, elders conferring in low urgent voices, the machinery of the Dominion grinding into its formal processes, adjusting to the shape of something that just changed underneath it. Reina stands at the edge of the emptying floor, and doesn't move for a long moment. Because there's a version of her, the version that died twice, who would already be exhausted by this. Who would want, badly, to just sit down somewhere quiet, and stop being watched for an hour. That version is still in here somewhere, underneath the rank 5, and the fractured curse, and the sister, who almost got what she came for. Reina doesn't let her sit down yet. There isn't time. Bran finds her outside the chamber doors, in a narrow stone corridor, where the noise of the departing gallery fades to almost nothing. He doesn't say anything at first. Just stands there, arms crossed, watching the exit like habit hasn't let go of him, yet even though the danger's past. You didn't have to concede the precedence point, he says eventually. Yes I did, Reina says. If I'd fought it outright, I'd have looked like I was breaking the law to get what I wanted. Which is exactly what she wanted the room to see. Conceding it and then invoking 14, that's not breaking the law. That's using it better than she does. You planned that. In the middle of the room. While she was talking. I planned it 3 months ago, Reina says. On the ridge. Before I knew she'd try it. I just didn't know when. Bran studies her for a moment. Something behind his eyes shifts, not surprise exactly. More like a man double-checking a measurement he already trusted, just to be sure. There's something you should know, he says. Before tomorrow. Reina goes still. Because that particular tone, flat, careful, weighted, is the tone people use right before they hand you something you can't put back down once you've picked it up. Say it, she says. He doesn't, not right away. Looks down the corridor first, checking it's empty, checking twice, which tells her, before he opens his mouth again, that whatever's coming, He's been sitting on it a lot longer than tonight. The riders the traitor mentioned, he says. The ones scouting the ridge approach, before the attack. I know whose crest they were wearing. Whose? Nobody's. Not officially. It's an old insignia. Retired 30 years ago, when the Western Border Command was dissolved. A pause. It was your father's command. Reina doesn't move. Doesn't breathe, for one full second, which is strange, because she survived a suppression wave, and a mountain, and 2 entire deaths, and this, 4 words, said quietly in a stone corridor, is what finally stops her lungs. My father is dead, she says. Except the sentence comes out wrong. Comes out like a question dressed up, as a fact, because some part of her has already started doing the math, and doesn't like where it's landing. That's what the Dominion recorded, Brand says. 15 years ago. Missing in action, presumed dead, border skirmish, no body recovered. A pause, longer this time, the weight of years behind it. I was 17. It's the same skirmish that put me in a ditch bleeding out, the one your grandmother found me in. Which means I was there. Which means I know exactly what happened that day, because I lived through it. And he wasn't dead, Brand says. He faked it. Because he found out someone inside the Dominion was selling border intelligence to a hostile clan, and he couldn't prove who, and the only way to investigate, without getting killed for asking the wrong questions, was to stop existing, as a person the wrong questions could be traced back to. Reina's voice comes out very quiet. You've known this the entire time. I've known it, since I was 17 years old, he says. He's the one who sent me. Not your grandmother's debt, that part's true, that part happened exactly the way I told you. But the reason I came to you specifically, the reason I was already 3 days, from the Ridge Road, when your exile was announced, he stops. Starts again. He's been watching the Dominion Council for 15 years. From outside it. Waiting for proof solid enough to bring back with him. And 2 months ago, he found out someone inside the council was preparing to move against you directly. Meredith. He wasn't certain. Not until last night. Brand's jaw tightens. The riders on the western approach, the ones who ran the suppression wave, one of them was carrying correspondence. We recovered it after the attack failed. It's not signed. But the seal on it matches a seal your father spent 15 years trying to trace back to its source. Whose seal? I don't know yet, Brand says. He doesn't know yet. That's what he's still trying to find out. That's the whole reason any of this, the debt, the ridge, me standing in this corridor right now, that's the reason it exists at all. Reina leans back against the cold stone wall. Because she needs something solid right now. Something that isn't moving, isn't lying, isn't performing warmth it doesn't feel. Because her father is alive. Because he's been alive for 15 years, while she carried 3 separate lifetimes worth of grief, that never once needed carrying. Because someone inside the council, that raised her, trained her, watched her grow up in rooms full of banners bearing her own family's crest, has spent 15 years selling something to somebody, and her father has spent 15 years hunting them, and none of it, ever once made its way back to her. Until now. Until a man she's known for 3 months finally decided the truth was worth more than the silence he'd been ordered to keep. Why tell me tonight, she says. Why not the day we met? Why not any of the last 3 months? Because he told me not to, Brand says. Simple. Honest. No flinching. Because he said, if it came out too early, it could put you in more danger than it protected you from. And because I agreed, with him, right up until the moment 3 cultivators tried to fracture your bond off a mountainside using a technique that isn't taught anywhere in the Dominion's official archives. Which means whoever's inside that council is done playing slow, Brand says. Which means tomorrow's comparison isn't just about your sister anymore. It's the first place they'll try again, in front of witnesses, where it's hardest to trace back to any one hand. A pause. I couldn't send you into that without you knowing what you're actually walking into. Reina is quiet for a long moment. The corridor stretches empty and gray around them, torchlight flickering low against old stone, and somewhere beyond it the last of the gallery crowd files out, into the evening. Does Ashgrim know? She says finally. He's known since the attack, Bran admits. He recognized the seal before I did. He asked me to be the one to tell you. Said it needed to come from someone who chose to say it, not something that just arrived, uninvited, in your head. That, more than anything else tonight, is what makes something in Reina's chest finally loosen. That was considerate of him, she says. Don't tell him I said that. Wasn't planning to. A faint, exhausted almost smile passes between them. Gone as fast as it arrived. Because there isn't room for it to stay, not tonight, not with a comparison duel waiting at dawn, and a father somewhere out past the border pretending to be a ghost, and a council elder, who may or may not be selling secrets to whoever sent riders wearing a dead command's crest up a mountain to kill her. I need to see the correspondence, Reina says. Tonight. Before I sleep. It's not much. A single line, half-burned. We're still working out what it says. I don't care how little it is, she says. I've spent 2 lifetimes finding out the truth, after it stopped being useful. I'm done doing that. Bran nods once. Doesn't argue. Leads her down the corridor toward the small room, where Ashgrim is already waiting, a scrap of scorched parchment laid flat on the table in front of him, amber eyes fixed on it like he's been staring at it for hours, and still hasn't decided what it means. The parchment is barely a fragment. Most of it burned away in whatever fire the attackers tried, and failed to set, before the wave collapsed. What survives is 6 words, and half a seal, pressed into wax gone brittle with age. Reina reads it twice. When the bond completes, move on the rest is ash. Move on the what, she says. Quiet. We don't know, Ashgrim says. But the phrasing tells you something. Whoever wrote this knew the bond was going to complete, before it happened. Which means this wasn't written, after you reached, through the veil. It was written before, Reina says. Slow. Cold settling into her chest like something poured in, through a crack. Before the choosing, Ashgrim says. Before you ever walked into that hall. The room goes very still. Because that single fact rearranges everything. Because if this letter existed, before the ceremony, then someone knew, or believed, or planned, that Reina would choose the cursed spirit behind the warning ward, long before she ever stepped through those doors. Which means the ward wasn't an accident. Which means the wolf being in that hall, in that specific dark corner, on that specific night, was never a coincidence at all. Which means someone wanted the bond to happen. Just not for her sake. Someone set this up, Reina says. The wolf. The ward. All of it. Someone wanted me bonded to Ashgrim, before I ever knew his name. Ashgrim's amber eyes hold hers, steady, unreadable. I told you, he says. Your bloodline didn't bond with mine by accident. I just didn't know, yet whose hand was doing the arranging. Do you know now? No, he says. But I know it's someone, with enough reach inside the Dominion to place a warning ward on a beast, that was never catalogued for selection in the first place. That's not a low-ranked elder's kind of reach. Bran's voice comes low. That narrows the list. It narrows it to people capable of moving Meredith like a piece on a board, Reina says. Not people who work for her. Nobody answers that. Because nobody has to. The word sitting unspoken in the room is the one none of them are ready to say out loud, yet, that whatever's coming isn't a council intrigue contained to one ambitious elder, and one golden sister, with a grudge. It's bigger than the Dominion has told anyone in 300 years. Reina sits with that a long moment. Feels the old instinct rise up in her, the first life instinct, the one that wants to trust the nearest warm hand, and let it carry some of the weight. She recognizes it. names it. Sets it down, gently, the way you'd set down something you loved once, and can't afford to hold right now. Tomorrow, she says finally, I fight my sister in a courtyard in front of 40 witnesses, for a title I don't even want, as much as they think I do. A pause. And somewhere underneath that fight, there's a much older one already happening, that none of us can see the whole shape of yet. Then we handle tomorrow first, Bran says. One fight at a time. That's how you survive both. That's a soldier's answer. I was a soldier, before I was anything else, he says. Your father made sure of that. Something in the way he says it, quiet, almost apologetic, like he's aware the sentence carries more weight than he means it to tonight, makes Reina look at him a beat longer than she means to. She spent 3 months watching this man work. Watched him carry water, without being asked, repair walls that should have collapsed twice over, hold a line against 2 trained cultivators, without breaking stride. She'd assumed, the way you assume things about people you haven't earned the right to ask about yet, that it was simply who he was. Steady by nature. Reliable by temperament. It wasn't nature. It was 4 years of deliberate shaping, at the hands of a man who needed someone he could trust, with the single most important thing left in his life, and didn't have the luxury of trusting badly. He trained you, she says. For 4 years. After the debt. Before he sent me here. A small, tired exhale. I didn't just owe your family a life. I owe your father the version of myself that could actually pay it back. Reina doesn't answer that right away. There's too much in it, gratitude, guilt, 15 years of a dead man, who isn't dead, standing invisible at the edge of every room she's walked through since she was 4 years old. Because somewhere inside her, something is doing the arithmetic she isn't ready to say out loud yet. 15 years of birthdays with an empty chair. 15 years of her grandmother's old stories about a soldier who died defending a border nobody remembers the name of anymore. 15 years of grief she built her second entire life around, brick by careful brick, because grief was easier to carry than the alternative, that somewhere out past a line on a map, he might have chosen silence over her. Except he hadn't chosen silence. He'd chosen her safety. And there's a version of that sentence that should feel like comfort. Except right now it just feels like one more decision made about her life, without anyone once asking what she wanted. Does he know what I've become, she asks. Quieter than she means to. In this life. The rank. The bond. Any of it. He knows, Ashgrim says. Not Bran. The bond carries more than either of you controls, remember. Some of what runs through it doesn't stay contained to the two of us. You're telling me my father has been watching, through the bond. I'm telling you, Ashgrim says, carefully, that somewhere out past the border, a man who gave up his own name 15 years ago to protect you, from something he still can't fully see, felt exactly what happened on that mountain last night. Felt the wave hit. Felt it fail. A pause. If I were him, I wouldn't have slept either. Reina closes her eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to let that settle somewhere it can be carried, without breaking her. Because there is a version of this, the soft, grateful, first life version of her, that wants to cry right now. Wants to feel the relief of it, pure and uncomplicated, my father is alive, and let that be enough for one night. Except it isn't enough. Because a father who's alive, and hunted, hiding, unable to come home, is still a father she can't touch, can't see, can't sit across a table from and simply be a daughter to, not yet, maybe not for a long time. Grief and relief, it turns out, can occupy the exact same square inch of a person's chest at once. She lets herself feel both. For exactly as long as it takes to breathe in and out one time. Then she opens her eyes, and the exhaustion is still there, and the fight is still tomorrow, and none of that has changed one bit for all the truth that just got poured into the room. I need to sleep, she says. 2 hours. No more. I want the letter re-examined by morning, every mark on that seal, every fiber in the parchment, anything that tells us more than 6 burned words. I'll have it done, Bran says. And Bran. He stops at the door. Thank you, she says. For telling me tonight. Even though he told you not to. Something moves behind his eyes, not quite a smile, not quite anything she has a name for. You've been lied to by people who loved you before, he says. I wasn't going to be one more. She holds that sentence a moment. Turns it over. Because it's the closest thing to a confession either of them has said out loud tonight, buried in a sentence that's technically about honesty, and nothing else. That's not a debt talking, she says. Quiet. Testing the ground. No, he agrees. It isn't. Neither of them says anything else about it. There isn't room to, not tonight, not with everything else already stacked on the table between them. But something has shifted in the air of the small room, subtle, unspoken, the kind of thing that doesn't need naming to be real. He leaves. The door closes soft behind him. Ashgrim stays. Sits across the small table, from her, amber eyes catching the low candlelight, and for while neither of them says anything at all. You're thinking about your first life, he says eventually. Not a question. I'm thinking about how many people I trusted who turned out to be lying, she says. And how tonight, someone finally didn't. Does that scare you more than the lying did? She looks at him. Really looks, the way she hasn't quite let herself in 3 months of grief, and training, and mountainside survival. A little, she admits. Trusting someone new is the part one never got right. Not once. Not in either life before this one. Then don't trust him, because it's easy, Ashgrim says. Trust him because he earned it. Those are different things, and you know the difference better than almost anyone alive. She almost laughs. It comes out closer to a breath. That's the most encouraging thing you've said to me in 3 months. Don't get used to it, he says. Tomorrow I'm going back to making you hold stances, until your arms give out. I'd expect nothing less. The candle burns low. Somewhere beyond the walls of this borrowed room, the Dominion sleeps uneasy, unaware that 6 burned words, and a 15-year-old lie are about to rearrange everything it thinks it knows about the girl, who chose the cursed wolf. Reina sits while longer before she lets herself lie down. Thinks about her second life, the one where she chose solitude on purpose, built herself alone, because alone felt safer than the alternative. She'd told herself that was strength. Tonight she isn't so sure anymore. Because strength, it turns out, isn't the same thing as isolation. Strength is a man repairing a wall by moonlight, without being asked. Strength is a 300-year-old curse choosing honesty over comfort. Strength is a father who gave up his own name so his daughter could keep hers. She didn't understand that in either life, before this one. She's starting to understand it now, and the timing, on the eve of a fight that could still take everything, feels less like coincidence, and more like the exact moment she needed to learn it. Reina finally lies down. Doesn't sleep right away. Lies there in the dark, listening to her own pulse, listening to the fainter, steadier beat of the Bond running alongside it, and thinks about a father she hasn't seen since she was 4 years old, standing somewhere out past a border he can't cross, feeling every heartbeat of a fight he can't help her win. Tomorrow, she faces her sister in a courtyard built for spectacle. Somewhere underneath that fight, a much older war is already choosing its next move. She closes her eyes. And for the first time in 3 lives, when sleep finally comes, it isn't running from anything. It's getting ready. Because tomorrow there will be a courtyard, and a crowd, and a sister, who spent her whole life believing gold was the same thing as strength. Tomorrow there will be a comparison the Dominion hasn't seen invoked in 60 years, and a foundation built stone by stone on a mountain, that tried to kill her and failed. Tomorrow there will be a council elder, who knows more than she's saying, and a hidden war, with a shape none of them can see yet, and a father somewhere past the border, who will feel every second of it, through a bond he can't reach, but can still, somehow, hear. None of that changes what happens the moment the sun clears the eastern wall. One fight. One courtyard. One girl who has already died twice, walking out to prove that the third time she isn't planning on losing anything at all. Not the title. Not the bond. Not the father she just found out she never actually lost. Nothing at all. Not tomorrow. Not ever again. 2 lives taught her exactly what it costs to lose the things that matter most. She is done paying that price for anyone in this life or the next. Morning again. Except this one arrives different. Because the last 2 mornings almost killed her, and this one only has to watch her win. The courtyard is full, before the sun clears the eastern wall. Word travels fast in a city built on gossip and blood loyalty, and by dawn there isn't a clan representative left in the Dominion who doesn't know what happened in that chamber yesterday. Standing room only. People pressed 3 deep against the outer rail, craning for a look at the girl who walked onto a mountain 3 months ago carrying almost nothing, and walked back down carrying a title nobody expected her to survive long enough to claim. Elder Meredith is already on the dais when Reina arrives. Beside Elder Tholan. Face composed. Aura flat. Giving away exactly nothing. Except Reina knows now what that flatness is hiding. Knows there's a 15-year conspiracy sitting behind those calm eyes, a fear bigger than one girl's bloodline, a war nobody in this courtyard has been told exists. She files it away. Because today isn't the day for that fight. Today is smaller. And somehow, impossibly, today still matters more than it should. Because there's a version of Reina, the one who died twice, the one who spent 2 entire lifetimes learning exactly how much a courtyard full of watching eyes can cost a person, who still feels her pulse climb standing here. Not from fear. From the strange, unfamiliar weight of finally being seen clearly, in daylight, by people who spent months certain she'd disappear quietly, and never had to think about her again. She isn't disappearing today. Selwyn is already in position across the courtyard. Composed. Golden. Exactly as powerful, as she's always looked standing in good light, and she's chosen her spot carefully, the one place in the whole courtyard, where the morning sun catches her hair, and makes the gold look like it was poured on by the sky itself. Of course she chose that spot. She meets Reina's eyes across the distance. Holds them. However this resolves, sister, Selwyn says, clear enough for the front row to hear, I hope you know I'm proud of what you built. Beautiful. Generous sounding. The kind of line that makes any win she gets look gracious, and any loss look like it came from a place of love instead of fear. Reina has heard this exact tune before. Slightly different key. 2 other lives. Save it, she says. Quiet enough that only Selwyn hears it. I know what you sent to the ridge. Something flickers behind Selwyn's eyes. A recalculation, fast, involuntary. I don't know what you mean, she says. I kept the order, Reina says. A beat. Elder Meredith was very thorough about her copies. She missed one. That's a lie. There was no order to keep, the attackers on the ridge carried nothing traceable, no signed instructions, nothing that would hold up to scrutiny. But Reina has watched what the sentence does to her sister's composure, watched the green edge bleed into that gold aura for exactly 1 unguarded second, and that's enough. That tells her the document exists somewhere. That tells her Meredith has an exposure she doesn't know Reina's aware of. Which means the ground under this whole structure is a lot less stable than anyone standing in this courtyard believes. She files it. Turns to face the starting mark. The first phase begins. Selwyn's output is everything Reina expected. Brilliant. Spectacular. Built entirely for the crowd. A sustained rank 6 display that floods the courtyard in warm gold light, drawing an involuntary sound from the gallery, the kind of gasp people make when they've decided, in advance, exactly what winning is supposed to look like. Because that's the trick of it, Reina thinks, watching the light wash over 40 upturned faces. Spectacle doesn't have to be true. It just has to arrive first, loud enough, bright enough, that nobody thinks to ask what's holding it up underneath. Reina's output is rank 5. Clean. Precise. Structurally exact. It doesn't look as impressive. She can feel the gallery's attention shift, subtle, automatic, the recalibration that says the golden one is winning. She holds her form. Doesn't let it change a single thing about how she feels. First phase scores. Selwyn leads. The second phase begins. Duration. This is where foundation matters. This is what Ashgrim spent 3 brutal months teaching her, on a mountain, that tried to break her down to nothing, so she could be built back correctly. Duration isn't about power. It's about structure, whether the meridian pathways hold their integrity under sustained draw, whether a cultivator built something that lasts, or just something that shines. Selwyn's brilliance, burning so hot in the first phase, starts to fluctuate at the 4-minute mark. Barely visible. Only a trained eye catches it. But the fluctuation means her reserves are pulling against a technique that was never built for extended duration in the first place. The gold dims slightly at the edges. The warmth it pushes into the courtyard air goes uneven. Reina's silver and gold holds exactly where it started. At 7 minutes, Selwyn's aura is visibly drawing inward. Consolidating. Managing the drain now, instead of displaying it. Reina doesn't accelerate. Doesn't perform. Holds her output at the same steady level she began with, because that's what a correct foundation does. It holds. And holds. And holds, past the point where something beautiful, but structurally flawed collapses under its own weight. At 9 minutes, Selwyn drops to passive output. Second phase ends. The gallery has gone very quiet. The specific quiet, that means 40 people are doing arithmetic they didn't expect to have to do this morning. Elder Tholan announces the scores. Reina leads in duration. The aggregate is level. The third phase. Precision. This is the phase Selwyn cannot win. And knows she cannot win. And is now, Reina sees, from across the courtyard, in the space of one long breath, doing something about that knowledge. Because her composure is still intact. It's always intact. It's the most durable thing about her, more durable than any cultivation technique she's ever trained. But she's moving, through a decision in real time, and Reina watches the shape of it, and understands, with the cold clarity of a woman who's died, from underestimating this exact thing twice, that Selwyn has no intention of competing the third phase fairly. The precision phase requires both cultivators to channel their output, through the courtyard's central pillar. Simultaneously. It's the only phase, where they physically approach the same space. Proximity. And for someone willing to use it, as a weapon, proximity is an opportunity. Reina doesn't know the exact mechanism yet. Doesn't need to. She's died twice, from underestimating exactly how elegant her sister's willingness to act directly can be, once the public architecture stops working in her favor. She looks over her shoulder. Finds Bran. The look she gives him is specific. He reads it instantly, because 3 months of paying attention have taught him exactly how she communicates, without saying a word. He shifts 2 steps left, placing himself in Elder Tholan's direct sightline, and squarely in the path between the gallery exit and the central pillar. Ashgrim's warmth intensifies at her shoulder. She has something on her person, he says. Voice stripped to operational quiet. Left sleeve. The spiritual signature is wrong. It's a disruption shard. Contact triggered. A disruption shard. Small. Concealable. Devastating to an unstable bond at close range. Reina's bond isn't unstable, but a direct contact disruption, at full force, against a cultivator this recently advanced, could still knock the foundation out of alignment. Drop the rank reading. Contaminate the precision score. It wouldn't destroy the bond. It wouldn't need to. It would only need to create enough technical disruption in that one phase to tip the aggregate back Selwyn's way. After which the evaluation closes, precedent stands, and everything stays exactly the way it was supposed to stay all along. Reina looks across the courtyard at her sister. She could expose it right now. Announce it. Call for a body check. Stop the phase before it starts. She has the information. She has Ashgrim's read, and she trusts it completely. She could end this cleanly in the next 30 seconds. Except ending it cleanly, she thinks, isn't the same thing as ending it completely. Because she's thinking about the termination order she just claimed to have and doesn't. Thinking about the exposure she just named, and watched confirm itself in her sister's eyes. Thinking about Elder Meredith, sitting up on that dais, flat and gray, and terrified of something none of them have named yet. Thinking about the fact that a disruption shard, concealed on a primary heirs person during a formal Dominion evaluation, isn't a small violation. It's a criminal one. The kind that goes to the full council. The kind that cannot be quietly managed by anyone, including a woman, with 15 years of secrets to protect. She thinks about what she actually wants out of this third life. Not just to survive it. Not just to win a title she never particularly wanted in the first place. To build something that doesn't require her to keep dying just to protect it. She lets the precision phase begin. Lets Selwyn approach the pillar. Lets her sister's hand drift toward the inner seam of her sleeve. And then, with the exact timing of someone who has run this sequence completely in her head, Reina steps back from the pillar. Turns to Elder Tholan. And says, in a voice that carries clean to the back row. I'd like to request a formal spiritual integrity check before contact begins in the precision phase. I believe there is a prohibited instrument being carried by my co-participant. Selwyn's hand freezes inside her sleeve. Elder Tholan looks at Reina. Then at Selwyn. Then at Elder Meredith. Then back at Selwyn. The request is valid under evaluation law, he says. And for the first time in the 2 days Reina has watched this man, his professional neutrality carries something underneath it. Something that sounds, distinctly, like it's been waiting a long time for permission to surface. This is an unfounded accusation, Meredith starts. If there's nothing to find, Tholan says, it will be confirmed in 30 seconds. It takes 22. The disruption shard is a clan-grade instrument. Bearing the Ashfane crest. Signed out from the clan armory 3 days ago, under Elder Meredith's own authorization code. The courtyard doesn't make a single sound. Selwyn stands there, while 2 neutral elders document the shard, hands perfectly still, expression doing something it almost never does in public, holding uncertain, the composure cracking at the edges, because there's no move left on the board. She looks, for the first time in 3 of Reina's lives, like exactly what she is. Not a golden heir. Just someone who was never, as inevitable as she was raised to believe. She looks at Reina across the distance between them. Reina looks back. Doesn't offer comfort. Doesn't offer cruelty. Doesn't perform triumph for the crowd the way this moment could so easily let her. She simply looks, the complete, unhurried attention of a woman who waited 3 lifetimes to finally see something clearly. Then she turns back to Elder Tholan. I'd like to complete the precision phase, she says. The 3rd phase runs without incident. Reina's score is technically exact, correct foundation, stable bond, 3 months of ridge conditions pushed into a level of control precision the assessment instruments register, with the same harmonic chime they produced yesterday, running well above their calibration ceiling. The aggregate isn't close. Elder Tholan announces the result. Reina Ashfane is assessed as primary bloodmarked heir. Rank 5 ascending. Bond stable. Cultivation trajectory verified. Formal recognition binding under Dominion law, effective immediately. Elder Meredith is escorted from the dais before the sun finishes climbing, pending full council review. Selwyn is placed on formal clan suspension. escorted from the courtyard by two neutral warriors. She goes quietly, her composure holds, because it always holds, but as she passes Reina, she stops. 1 second. Exactly one. You knew, she says. From the beginning. No performance left in her voice. The flattest, most undecorated thing Reina has ever heard, from her sister. From before the beginning, Reina says. Selwyn looks at her a moment longer. Something in her eyes does something complicated, and private that Reina doesn't have a name for, and doesn't try to find one. Then she walks forward, and the warriors take her, through the gate, and she's gone. The courtyard empties slowly. Clusters of clan representatives departing in low murmurs, elders conferring, the machinery of the Dominion adjusting to the shape of everything that just shifted underneath it. Reina doesn't move for a long moment. Stands at the edge of the emptying square in the flat morning light, and lets herself feel exactly nothing yet, because there isn't room for feeling, until the next thing happens. Because winning a title, she's learning, doesn't come with the relief people always promise it will. It just clears one obstacle, so the next one has room to show itself. Her second life taught her that lesson once already, and taught it badly, in a locked room, where solitude finally cracked her open, from the inside. She isn't interested in relearning it the hard way a third time. So she stands there, breathing, cataloging everything that still needs answering instead of letting herself celebrate anything at all. Because Elder Meredith hasn't been questioned yet. Because 6 burned words, and half a wax seal are still sitting in a locked room somewhere, waiting to become an answer instead of a fragment. Because a father she thought was dead is somewhere past a border he still can't cross, and she hasn't heard from him at all, not one word, not one sign, since the moment Bran told her the truth. She's still standing there when the summons arrives. A single runner, out of breath, pressed through the thinning crowd, with a scroll bearing no clan seal at all. For you, the runner says. Only you. He said to say, the letters finished burning. He knows what it says now. Reina's chest goes tight. Who sent this? The runner hesitates. Glances at Ashgrim. At Bran. Lowers his voice like the words themselves might be dangerous to say too loudly in an open square. He didn't give a name, the runner says. He said you'd know. She does know. She reads the scroll twice, before her hand stops shaking enough to fold it properly. 6 words, once burned to nothing, now reconstructed through methods she doesn't ask about, and doesn't want explained in a public courtyard. 6 words that finish the sentence that's been sitting incomplete in her chest, since the night in that stone corridor. When the bond completes, move on the Ashfane line itself. Not on her. On the entire bloodline. Reina reads it a third time, because some sentences need to be read 3 times, before the shape of them fully lands. It's not about the throne, she says. Quiet. To Ashgrim, to Bran, to no one, to herself. It was never about the throne. No, Ashgrim says. His voice, for once, carries none of its usual dry edge. I don't think it ever was. They meet that evening in the same sealed chamber, where Selwyn once stood across from Elder Meredith, and had her whole world quietly rearranged. Elder Tholan is there, grim-faced, having personally requested the interrogation. Bran stands near the door, arms crossed, watching it the way he's watched every door, since the day they met. Ashgrim sits, human-formed, amber eyes fixed on the woman seated in the center of the room. Reina takes the chair across from her. Doesn't sit close. Doesn't sit far either. Close enough that Meredith can't mistake this for anything other than what it is, a woman, who nearly had her killed, sitting across from the person she failed to stop, with nothing left between them, but the truth. Meredith looks smaller than she did on the dais. Stripped of the robes of office, in plain gray, she looks exactly like what she is, an old woman, who has spent 15 years terrified of something she never once found the courage to name out loud. You'll tell us everything, Tholan says. Or the council decides your fate, without the benefit of your side of it. Meredith is quiet a long moment. Long enough that Reina starts to wonder if the silence is the only answer they're going to get. Then she starts talking. 300 years ago, Meredith says, there was a founding pact. Before the Ashfane line existed, as it does now. Before the Dominion had a name at all. A pause, her voice going thin, worn down by decades of carrying something alone. A curse was bound into a spirit, the one you call Ashgrim, not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. Because a bloodline bonded to that spirit's full, unshackled power had already once brought this land, within one generation of ending. Everything. Every clan. Every city. Gone, because a family drunk on that kind of strength decided the rest of us were expendable. The room goes very still. So the founders bound the curse, Meredith goes on. Suppressed the power instead of destroying it, because destroying it outright would have killed the spirit and, through the bond, the bloodline along with it, and the founders weren't willing to go that far. They chose containment. A ward strong enough to last centuries. A warning, instead of an execution. And you believed the bond forming again would wake the same danger, Reina says. I didn't believe it, Meredith says. I inherited the belief. From my mother, and hers before her. Records passed hand to hand, elder to elder, never written into any archive a foreign clan could steal, or a curious heir could stumble across by accident. 15 years ago, I found evidence someone outside the Dominion had learned about the old pact anyway. Someone who wanted the curse broken, not out of ignorance, but on purpose, someone who believes that kind of power, unleashed again, could be controlled this time. Used. Weaponized against us instead of protecting us. That's who my father's been hunting, Reina says. Slow. The pieces sliding into place with a weight that presses the air out of her chest. Not a border smuggler. Not a petty informant. Someone trying to engineer exactly what just happened to me on purpose. I believe so, Meredith says. I believed it for 15 years, and I have spent every one of those years terrified of being right. Her hands, folded in her lap, tremble slightly. When you walked past every catalogued spirit in that hall and reached through a ward that was never supposed to be breachable, I didn't see an heir making a brave choice. I saw the exact thing my mother spent her whole life warning me to prevent, happening anyway, in front of 40 witnesses, and I panicked. So you tried to have me killed, Reina says. Flat. Not a question. I tried to stop the bond before it could complete, Meredith says. The ridge was supposed to break your foundation before you built one strong enough to survive. The wave was supposed to fracture what the ridge failed to break. I told myself every single time that I was protecting 300 years of peace. A long pause. I don't know anymore if that was ever true, or if it was just the story I needed to keep believing, so I could live with what I was doing. Nobody speaks for a moment. The candle between them gutters low, throwing long shadows up the stone walls. The letter, Reina says finally. Move on the Ashfane line itself. That's not you. That's someone else. Someone who wants the bloodline gone, not contained. Yes, Meredith says. Quiet. Almost relieved to finally say it out loud, after 15 years of carrying it alone. Whoever sent those riders to the ridge wasn't trying to stop the danger I was afraid of. They were trying to clear the obstacle standing between them and it. If your line survives, and the bond holds, you become the single greatest threat to anyone who wants that power for themselves. Which means, as of this morning, you're not just an heir to a throne anymore. She looks up. Meets Reina's eyes directly for the first time since she started talking. You're the last thing standing between whoever wrote that letter and exactly the kind of catastrophe my family has spent 300 years trying to prevent. Reina sits with that. Feels the shape of it settle into her chest alongside everything else this endless day has already handed her, the throne, the sister, the father, and now this, a war 3 centuries old, that just quietly named her its next battlefield. Because that's what today has actually been, underneath the courtyard, and the crowd, and the shard glinting in an elder's shaking hand. Not a victory. A door opening onto a much bigger room than the one she thought she was walking into. She almost laughs at the shape of it. Almost, and doesn't, because laughing feels like the wrong response, and there isn't a right one available yet. "Where's my father now?" she says. "Close," Meredith says. "Closer than you think. He sent word an hour ago, through channels even I don't fully understand. He's crossing the border tonight. Openly. For the first time in 15 years. A pause. He said he's done hiding behind a dead man's name, while his daughter fights his war alone." Something in Reina's chest, held tight for 15 years she didn't even know she was holding, finally lets go. Elder Tholan clears his throat. "The council will need everything you've just said, Meredith. Formally. Under oath." "I know," Meredith says. "I should have said it 15 years ago. Maybe none of this happens the way it did, if I'd trusted someone enough to say it out loud sooner." She looks at Reina one more time. "I was wrong about you. I want that on the record too. I thought I was watching the beginning of an ending. I was watching the beginning of the only thing that might actually stop it." Reina doesn't offer forgiveness. Doesn't offer absolution either. There isn't room in her chest, yet for either one, not, with the shard still sitting in an evidence box down the hall, not with 3 months of Ridge exhaustion still living in her bones. What she offers instead is simpler, and maybe more honest. "Tell the truth from here forward," she says. "That's the only thing that matters now." Meredith nods once. Slow. Like a woman finally setting down a weight she's carried so long she'd forgotten what walking upright without it felt like. They leave Meredith to the council's formal process. Walk out into a courtyard gone dark and quiet, torches lit along the walls, the crowd's long since dispersed back into a city that has no idea yet how much just changed underneath it in a single day. Reina stands there a long moment. Looks up at a sky she's seen from 3 different lifetimes, in 3 different bodies, carrying 3 different kinds of grief. "You knew some of this," she says to Ashgrim. Not accusing. Just tired enough to want confirmation instead of guessing. "I knew about the founding pact," he says. "I lived it. I didn't know about the letter, or the writer, who wants what he wants for reasons that aren't your protection." He's quiet a moment. 300 years, and I never once knew if the day would come when someone wanted the curse broken for the wrong reasons. I hoped it wouldn't. I built 3 centuries of very careful, very deliberate patience on that hope. And now? Now the hope's gone, he says. What's left is just work. I find I don't mind that as much as I expected to. Bran steps up beside her, quiet as always, close enough that she can feel the steadiness of him, without either of them needing to say a word about it. "He's really crossing tonight," Bran says. Not quite a question. More like a man checking a fact he still can't fully believe. "Tonight," Reina confirms. 15 years, Bran says. Shakes his head slowly. "I used to imagine this moment. What I'd say to him if I ever got to stand in a room where he wasn't hiding anymore. Somehow I never imagined it happening, because his daughter just took down a corrupt elder, survived an assassination attempt, and won a throne, all in the same week." In fairness, Reina says, neither did I. Something almost like a laugh moves through both of them. Small. Exhausted. Earned. They wait at the western gate until well past midnight. The city sleeps uneasy around them, torches burning low along the wall, guards shifting their weight in the cold. Reina doesn't sleep, doesn't sit, just stands watching the dark road stretch out toward a border she's never once in 3 lifetimes been allowed to see for herself. The waiting is its own kind of strange. Because she's spent 2 lives learning how to stop hoping for things, how to file hope away in the same drawer, as everything else too dangerous to keep close. And here she is, standing at a gate in the cold, hoping so hard it aches, for a man she can't remember, who exists mostly as a name in her grandmother's old stories, and a set of borrowed features on Bran's face when he talks about honor. She almost tells herself to stop. To brace instead, the way she's braced for every disappointment life has ever handed her. Except she doesn't. For once, she just lets herself want something, without protecting herself from wanting it. When he finally comes, it isn't dramatic. No banners. No procession. Just a single rider, worn coat, gray at the temples and a way 15 hidden years will do to anyone, moving slow and steady up the last stretch of road like a man who has spent a decade and a half rehearsing this exact walk, and still doesn't quite trust himself to get it right. He stops 10 feet away. Looks at her a long moment. "You look like your mother," he says. Voice rough. And used to being spoken in the open like this. I used to worry I wouldn't remember what that looked like. Reina doesn't move for a second. Because there's a version of her, the girl who died at 24 believing a man's soft eyes, the woman who died at 31 believing solitude was safety, who wants, badly, to run the remaining 10 feet, and never once ask a single question. She doesn't run. She walks. Slow. Deliberate. Closes the distance on her own terms, the way she's learned to close every distance in this life, because trust earned matters more to her now than trust assumed. "You have a lot to explain," she says. "I know," he says. 15 years of it. "I know that too," he says. "I'm not asking you to forgive it tonight. I'm asking for the chance to spend however long it takes trying to earn it back properly." Reina looks at him. At the tired lines carved into a face she's only ever known from an old portrait and her grandmother's fading stories. At the weight 15 years of a war fought alone has clearly left on him. "That's a start," she says. "It isn't a full embrace. Isn't the tearful reunion either of them might have imagined once, in some easier version of this story. It's smaller than that, and somehow more honest for being smaller, a hand, finally, resting on a daughter's shoulder, after 15 years of only being able to feel her heartbeat, through a bond he wasn't even certain was carrying anything back to him at all. He studies her face a moment longer, like a man trying to memorize something he's afraid might disappear again, if he blinks. "Your mother would have been proud," he says. Quiet. "Not of the throne. Of the way you got there." Reina doesn't answer right away. Because there's a version of that sentence that could have broken her wide open a year ago, a lifetime ago, in a body that died believing love was the softest, safest thing a person could reach for. She isn't that version anymore. "I got there, because people who didn't have to help me, did anyway," she says finally. "You. Bran. Ashgrim. Even Meredith, in the end, once she finally stopped being afraid of her own silence." A pause. "I think that's the part worth being proud of." Behind them, Ashgrim watches with something unreadable in his amber eyes. Beside her, Bran stands quiet, giving the moment room the way he's given every moment room, since the day they met at the base of a mountain road. "There's a war coming," her father says finally. Quiet. Steady. The voice of a man who has spent 15 years learning exactly how to deliver bad news, without flinching from it. "Bigger than the one I've been fighting alone. Bigger than a throne, or a corrupt elder, or a sister, who was never really the enemy in the first place." "I know," Reina says. "I've known since this afternoon." "Then you know it isn't over." "It was never going to be over," she says. "Not for someone like me. Not in this life." "I could have wished you a simpler one," he says. "If I'd had any say in it." "You didn't," she says. "Neither did I. Neither of the first 2 times either." A pause, softer than she means it to be. "Maybe that's just what this bloodline gets. I've stopped waiting for simple." He almost smiles at that. The first thing close to a smile she's seen cross his face, since he stopped 10 feet away, and told her she looked like her mother. "Your grandmother used to say something like that," he says. "About this family. That we don't get spared the hard roads. We just get built strong enough to walk them. She sounds like she'd have liked Ashgrim's training methods, Reina says. She'd have liked you, he says. Exactly as you are right now. I only wish I'd been there to watch it happen instead of hearing about it 15 years too late, through a bond and a soldier's letters. She looks past him, out toward the dark line of the border he spent 15 years hiding behind, and feels something settle in her chest that has nothing to do with relief and everything to do with resolve. Because she has already died twice choosing the things that looked safe. Because safety was never actually the thing she wanted. Not really. Not underneath all the grief and all the careful armor she built around herself across 2 entire lifetimes. Because what she's wanted since the moment she reached through a warning ward and put her hand on something everyone else in that hall was too afraid to touch, was simply to stop running. To build something real. With people who earned the right to stand beside her instead of simply being handed the position. A father who chose the truth over comfort, even 15 years too late. A soldier who chose honesty over the silence he was ordered to keep. A cursed spirit who chose her over 3 centuries of careful, patient hiding. None of them perfect. All of them entirely, unmistakably real. She thinks of her first life again, briefly, the way you touch an old scar just to remind yourself it actually healed over. A man with soft eyes, and a hidden blade. A love that turned out to be nothing but performance, right up until the moment it wasn't performance at all anymore, just a hand over her mouth, and a blade between her ribs. She thinks of her second life. The throne room she almost reached alone, and the poison that found the one crack solitude never quite managed to seal shut in time. Neither of those lives taught her what tonight finally has. That real strength isn't the armor you build to keep everyone else out. It's the discipline to let the right people in, and the hard-won clarity to know the difference, before it costs you everything all over again. She turns, finally, and looks back at the sleeping city behind her, the towers, the banners, the courtyard where a corrupt elder confessed a 300-year-old secret this same afternoon, the chamber where a sister, who spent her whole life being golden, discovered she'd never actually been in control of anything at all. The moon throne isn't waiting for her tomorrow. It was never really the point. The path ahead is longer than a single evaluation, wider than a single courtyard, and there is a war coming that none of them yet understand the full shape of. But for the first time in 3 lives, Reina Ashfane isn't walking into that unknown alone. She isn't walking into it as a woman waiting to be betrayed, or a woman too guarded to let anyone close enough to try. She's walking into it as exactly who she chose to become 3 months ago, on a mountain that tried to break her, and only managed to build her correctly instead. The Bond pulse beats steady against her chest. Her father's hand rests on her shoulder, warm and real, and 15 years overdue in every sense that matters. Brand falls into step at her right, the way he always does, without ever once being asked. Ashgrim's presence settles warm and constant at her left, a fracture in his curse still healing, one advancement at a time. The road ahead is dark. Long, uncertain in every single way that actually matters. She walks it anyway. Without hesitation. Because the girl who died twice finally understands the one thing neither of her first 2 lives ever taught her. Living forward was never about reaching the throne. It was about choosing, every single day, from now on, exactly who gets to stand beside you when the next fight inevitably comes. And this time, she's chosen correctly. Somewhere behind her, the city she nearly wasn't allowed to inherit settles into an uneasy sleep, unaware of how close it came tonight to losing far more than one heir's bloodline. Somewhere ahead of her, past a border her father spent 15 long years hiding behind, a war without a name, yet is already gathering its own kind of momentum, patient and old, and utterly indifferent to whether the Dominion is ready for it. She is not naive enough to believe the road ahead will be simple. 2 deaths already taught her exactly how expensive naivety can get, in ways she has no intention of ever paying for again. But she is not walking it as a girl anymore. Not the frightened 19-year-old who first knelt in a war tent and believed a soft voice over her own better judgment. Not the guarded, solitary woman who once thought a throne built alone could ever truly be safe. She is walking it as herself. Finally. Completely. For the first time in 3 long, hard-earned lives. And that, more than any title the council could ever grant her, is the victory she actually came here for. Not a throne. Not a crown. Just a life, finally, worth living forward instead of one more life spent quietly waiting to die, before it ever really began.